Okay, I think we're live. So hi everyone, welcome to our discussion of The Mask of Mirrors. And if you're here watching right now or in the playback, we would love to know your thoughts. What is your rating? I have a copy too. And if you did read this with us, you are champions because this was a monster. But yeah, and so I feel like you know everybody here at this point. If you watch my channel, I talk about all these people all the time, so you know them. But I guess we'll go around and do our star ratings. Is that what we normally do? Here's Nell. Did not reread. It's been a hot minute.
That's fair.
I do think it's one you have to read the next book right away because there's so much to take in that I'm going to forget a lot if I don't read the next one soon.
I was kind of surprised because I realized it had been a year since I read Liar's Knot, and then 2 years since I read Mask of Mirrors, and a year in between. And I actually remember Mask of Mirrors better than I thought I did. Like, usually I read a fantasy book and I'm like, this is all completely, even my favorite series, I was rereading Traitor's Blade and I was like, this is all completely new to me. This is great. I get to re-experience. This one, I was like, oh yeah, that scene. So even if it's confusing, I feel like it sticks well. So I'm kind of curious what other people's experience with that if they reread.
Hi, Kristen. Yeah. I know Kristen was struggling with it at first. I do think it's like a lot to take in at first. You have to push through a little bit.
I bought the second book as soon as I finished reading the first one because I was like, I'm definitely going to continue on. And then I was going to start reading the second book and I was like, oh, but then I might get mixed up for the live show of like what happened in the first book and the second book. So I was like, I better wait until after the live show because I finished this, I don't know, a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago. I guess.
Yeah, I think you're the first to finish.
I'm kind of in the round here. I'll give my my star rating here. By the way, if you are new here, my name is Sarah. Hello, my channel is Break Bookish. On Storygraph, I gave this 4.25 stars. But if you're going out of like whole star numbers, I would say 4, which I really, really enjoyed it. I think there were some things I didn't like about it, some things that I felt like could have been improved, that like it just wasn't quite 5-star material. And I'm sure we will talk about why that is as we discuss further.
Yes, I'm curious. But this is exciting to me because we already know Maria loved it. And Sarah giving it a 4. This is very exciting information.
Right.
Kate.
Well, and I think this is one of the ones where even if we all liked it, I feel like there's enough to talk about that it won't be quite quite as short as the Redemption in Indigo, where we had similar opinions and stuff. So my name's Kate. My channel is Kate Coy. I really liked this. I will say, so I would not recommend the method that I went with, which was to procrastinate in reading this until
I was going to call you out on that.
Oh no, I'll call myself out. It's fine. And then work got crazy. So I didn't read. I read like Friday. I read 130 pages, I think, of it, and then yesterday I read the rest of it. So I don't recommend that for anybody who hasn't read it yet, because the first like 200 pages, I definitely struggled because I liked the characters, but there's so many terms and like the different magic systems, like you just got to give it time, even as somebody who reads a lot of fantasy. But I ended up loving it. I'm giving it 5 stars. Definitely continuing. So
yay. I thought you might give it 5 stars based on, I was reading through the Discord this morning. So yay.
I was almost positive going in that I was going to give it 5 stars. So
it was one of my 5-star predictions. So I did think I was going to give it 5 stars, but there were just a few little things.
I'm Maria from the channel Maria Might Read That, and I gave it 4 stars on first read, and I technically failed and didn't finish my reread. I got almost halfway through and just had a lot going on. So I think I'm going to probably end up just giving it a 4 star again, but I technically, the caveat, didn't finish it off. But it feels like I think I have the same kind of, the things I love about it are the same, and things that don't quite make it, like Sarah was saying, to 5 stars are about the same for me. So I love the world building, but I also think some of the ways that it's done could be better. I love the characters, but I also feel like I could be even more emotionally attached to them. But I think it's like one of the most unique books, and I think that it's just got so much in there that even on reread, like there was still so much that it's not like on reread everything was all of a sudden making sense. Like there's still more that you could dig into, and it just felt like one of those that like you really will always kind of find new stuff every time. And I really like the world being its own kind of almost character. I feel like it's not an atmospheric book in the way that people think of atmospheric books, but it has such a like strong atmosphere at the same time. Yeah, so I really enjoyed it. Can't wait to finish my reread.
I'm also giving it 4. And mostly because I feel like I didn't get into it until 300 pages. And I had to say, like, it's not my typical, I'm not an epic fantasy reader. This is a lot to take on, but I feel like it's a lot even if you're used to this genre. And I know there's a glossary in the back. I don't use that. That's not helpful for me. And like all the family trees and all that stuff. Like, do you guys reference any of that stuff?
I was flipping back to it and there were things that weren't in there. And I was like, this needs to be more in depth.
That happened to me too. Like the fingers and all this. And I'm like, that's not back there. What is that?
They have Nadezra, the city name, in there, but they don't have, or no, they have Razan, but they don't have Nadezra, and they don't have Fresenian. Like they don't have all the like specifics. They have like one, and then you're from there. You kind of have to intuit the rest.
Yeah. But yeah, it's really interesting. So I just want to pull up some comments. This is, I think, a common complaint that Mel has with all the made up names. So like even the hour, the times were all made up. A lot of it was just like
there's
made
a
up.
lot.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot. So it's a lot to take on. That's why I thought a reread, you'd probably understand it better.
The world
I know
building
a lot of people did reread this city. It's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I had so many issues with the world building. I hated the world building in this book. Like, there was just so much that was unnecessary and done in such a poor way, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're like, there are other books that I've read that have also had very complicated world building, but that were just done in such a better way than how it was done in this book. And that was like my biggest gripe. That and that the first third is really slow and kind of boring. And that's like the last half of the book makes up for the slow start, but I really felt like it was longer than it needed to be. I do think we should acknowledge that Kristen from the channel, Kristen is Fully Booked, is not here today. Who is one of our book club co-hosts. She is having a baby, so she's not here. And I think that is about the best excuse that you could potentially have for missing a book club live. So
we are in baby watch.
That's why.
It was our bad timing that we did this specific book right around her due date.
I know, because she loves it so much.
She loves it so much, yeah. But hey, at least all of us liked it, so that's
right. So we did it. It's a win. And it's also interesting because
rewatch.
I feel like it's a full circle moment because we all met doing the Lady Trent series, which was written by Marie Brennan, and Marie Brennan is one of the co-authors of this. So is it Alec Helms is the other author?
I think they pronounce it. I saw them pronounce it recently in the Kickstarter. Ellis. I want to say it was like Ellis.
Oh, Alice. That makes sense.
Not like Alice, almost like Ellis, I think. It was one that I had a little bit of a hard time pronouncing, but they go by they, them, and
because I'm always interested when authors co-write. So I saw that they did like an AMA on Reddit, and Marie Brennan wrote everything about Ren, like that is her character, and all her POV was Ren, and then the other author did everything else, so like Vargo and all of those. So that's how they split it up, and I think they work together on the world building and stuff.
It does.
And then I wanted to say that because I feel like when you know that and you know Marie Brennan, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It also explains why Ren was my least favorite part about this book.
I knew it.
I thought I
knew that. I knew.
Oh yeah.
And I know. Yeah, Kate, isn't she your favorite?
She is. Yeah, I think I liked almost all the characters. I have not strong feelings about some of the villains, but yeah, I liked pretty much all the characters, but she's probably the most that's my type of character. So
yeah.
But I mean, I liked Lady Trent in the first book, so less so as the series went. But
yeah. Grace Serrato is my favorite, and then I do like Vargo a lot. I like what she does with him.
He's really interesting.
I like Ren, but I'm medium.
Yeah, Vargo's my favorite too.
I actually wish there had been more of Tess, like the sister.
Yes.
Because I loved her so much, and there was very, very little of her. And then also, I liked Grace Serrato and Vargo. Vargo at first, though, I don't know. Vargo is one of those characters that, like, I would go back and forth on. And like there would be a section I'd be like, oh, I really like this character. And there'd be another section I'd be like, what the heck are you doing? Like this doesn't make any sense.
I think you're kind of meant to feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like it is interesting because
not to lie.
there are
You're shipping
so
who?
many things. Vargo and
Ren and
Ren.
Vargo. Yeah.
Like the Vargo that, and like this also speaks to I think having the multiple authors, and like which is probably a good thing, because like when you meet Vargo, he feels like a totally different character from Ren's perspective from when you are in Vargo's perspective.
Yes.
Which is really interesting, because like that external perspective of him versus like his own internal. But I guess that's good,
like,
that because you shouldn't have them be the same.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that one of my favorite things about that, like it's kind of a con more than a heist, is that you get those different perspectives. And so usually I feel like when you have a con, the person who's pulling the con like has all the knowledge, and everyone else is kind of just being pulled along and like duped. And I like in this one where you'll have Ren's perspective and she thinks like she's being super clever about different things. And then you have the other perspectives and they'll catch things, but they won't, and then they'll misinterpret other things. I really liked how that was done.
Yeah, and there's a lot of POVs, but I kind of liked having them, even some of the random ones where like you don't get a lot from their point of view, but I kind of liked having the light shine on them a little bit to see that outside perspective.
When I felt like there were some things that were really left hanging at the end of this book, like that I hope in the second book will be resolved, like some characters that at first I thought were going to be more important to the story than they ended up being, particularly in the like noble families, where like we would get like different, and I don't want to say who because I don't want to spoil things because we're in the non-spoilers, but like certain perspectives that I'm like, oh well, that's, you know, why are they doing so much with that character, and then it didn't bear out in the end. And so like I hope that in the second book there's some more to like explain why that was such a big deal. Or like why those people were even there, other than just to give the flavor. And I think that's one of my biggest gripes, is that I feel like the first half of this book was really just like, let's establish the world without really doing anything of meaning. Like, and I get that that's kind of how it's set up, even from like Ren's perspective of like, she's starting this con. And so she has to kind of like get her footing and just be in this role. But I just thought it was kind of boring for most of the first third.
Yeah, I definitely get that. I didn't mind it just because I don't think I would have cared about some of the events that happen later if I hadn't had the time spent with some of the characters at the beginning. But I definitely agree it was very slow. And I definitely feel like you have to be willing to give it time or you're just going to check out.
I
feel like
worth it in the end.
Won't be a surprise for me to say that when I first read it, the first half was my favorite part and the second half I didn't love. And
of course.
It was the first half, yeah, because of course we're different opinions on that. But the first half, if it had been that way for the whole book, I think at the first read I would have given it 5 stars, and because of the second half it pulled it down. Whereas on reread, I did feel like the first half was slower and I was ready to get to the action-packed part of the second half. But I still, I agree with Sarah. I think pacing is an issue, and I think it's an issue in the second book too. Like that's one of the things that keeps the series from being 5 stars for me, because I just don't think it's balanced. I think that like it's slow and then it's breakneck speed, and you kind of don't get, like, I kind of like the breakneck speed for the second part because it fits with what's going on with Ren when she kind of comes out of the second part. Not without spoilers going into that, it feels like how she's feeling, this kind of like almost can't control everything's that like flying out of her control. But I don't think it was balanced well at the same time.
And I don't think there were enough of the like secondary characters in the first half. Like it really focused on Ren for the first half, and like that's where I think that if it had included, like if we had got Vargo's perspective from the beginning, and if we had gotten Gray, like we did get Gray right at the beginning a little bit, and we got a little bit of what's Leado? Is that his name?
I think it's Leado, yeah.
And so we did get them a little bit, but like the second half of the book definitely had more of the other perspective characters, and I think that's where also just because I didn't really like the way that Ren, like her sections were written. I didn't really like someone in the comments said something about like over explaining. It really did feel like that. Like it was extra wordy, and like the world building from Ren's perspective was so info dumpy. And like, let me tell you about this thing that like, and that really bothered me because a lot of the stuff that was in that, like, you would have just picked up on what it was later on. You didn't need it info dumped, and I felt like that made it more confusing than it needed to be, particularly about the magic system, like the Numenatra, is that what they're called? Like that whole system, I felt like I was really confused at first, but then in the second half, like they show you how it works, and so you don't need that first half to like info dump it because you see them in practice in the second half. And I think it's a lot easier to understand a magic system when you're seeing it actually working as opposed to having someone try and explain it to you, especially something as convoluted. And that's the other thing that I didn't like about the world building. The world building was convoluted. It was overly complex for no purpose. Like, that part really bothered me, like having all of the different times of day, the different day names, the different, like all of that stuff.
I just ignored all that part.
So
I just ignored all that.
Sorry, like each chapter heading having like
that meant nothing to me.
Whatever.
Yeah, I didn't.
It meant nothing.
Yeah, meant nothing. I didn't. That didn't set me up. It didn't add. I was like, I don't even know what this means. I just glossed over it. It meant nothing to me.
And I think it felt to me like that first third felt to me like someone who's come up with this really cool magic system that they love, and they have to like show how cool it is by explaining all of the details.
Yes.
And my eyes just glazed over like that. Seriously, the first couple hundred pages is like, I'm not even going to try to understand this. I don't really care. I'm here for characters and all the like maneuvering. Whatever. I'll figure it out eventually. But it was too info dumpy in the beginning for me.
Yeah, Kate.
It's funny because if you read the interviews, because I always read the interviews of these things afterwards, Ren and the whole thing is based on some kind of game that the authors play together, and it was Marie Brennan's character in this game. So I feel like they get invested in this game, and that comes out into the writing. So I'm like, it's interesting to see the inspiration behind. So they feel like invested in the character and want to set you all up with everything that they've done in this game. You know what I mean?
Yep. Agreed.
I think I also read it. It wasn't the AMA, but it was another interview where they said that they built Ren and I think it was Ren and the Rook that were like the specific characters that had been built up, and then everything else, including the plot, was built around that. So I think also that shows in like the secondary characters that Sarah was talking about being less like of a focal point and less like, I think the secondary characters, some of them are more interesting, but I think that they're definitely, like you can see at the beginning, they're not necessarily the focal point. Yeah. And then Kate, what you were saying, that was my biggest thing. And I think it's kind of a personal preference because I hear people loving that about the series too, but it feels very much like what you were saying about like just authors having a blast. Like I kind of feel like they're playing in a sandbox of their own world building, but I expect usually for that to be like the step when they're drafting, and then they refine that and make it less convoluted for the readers. And I like when authors have the knowledge and you like then ask them in interviews about like, oh, well, what about this? And they can tell you about this giant section of world building that's not in the book, but that it like somehow was still informed how the book goes, and they have all this knowledge, but I don't think we need it necessarily.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
The series feels
that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
I think I needed way more of the Rook too. Like that.
It was very small.
It was very small, and only like we get like that one little piece at the beginning and then nothing for so long. And I think that's also part of why I felt like the first part, there were so many discrete things happening that they did all come together at the end, but like you have the con, you have the Rook, you have this mystery that Serato's trying to solve, you have the money troubles of the what was their last name, Leado and
the House Trementis.
Yeah, like you have their whole thing, like you have like all these discrete parts, and like it took too long for those things to matter to each other, particularly some of them. Like, because like I know that you have to start with them like being discrete, but the knowledge of how they connected wasn't apparent early enough in the book for me to like care. And like, so there would be things that I would forget, like Serato and the missing kids thing. And then it would show up and I'd be like, oh yeah, there's that thing going on that I totally forgot about, which like at this point doesn't feel like it's important at all. So why do I even care kind of thing. Or, you know, you'd have like the mention of the Rook and be like, yeah, but like he hasn't actually done anything. Like that was the thing too. The Rook really didn't feel important enough to the story until like
Sorry.
the last
I guess
50
when
pages.
I mean the Rook, I mean the person we now know is the Rook also. Like I feel like
right.
I agree. Like specifically these
Yeah.
are the Rook scenes, minimal and not but like
yeah.
Well, yeah.
context.
Yeah. And it was fun to try and guess who the Rook was. And I definitely do think that like I was pulled in by that element of like trying to guess. And like obviously they did a really good job of putting in like to try and fool you into thinking like who the Rook is. And like I fell for most of those, which is totally fine. Like I'm all for that kind of feeling of like being led around by the nose a little bit by the authors. And I will say, like, I was happy with the reveal of the Rook. Like, I was worried there for a little while when like people kept being eliminated as possibilities, and I was like, oh, this is going to be something stupid, like someone who isn't even in the book at all, and I was going to be so mad because I could totally see Marie Brennan doing something dumb like that after how she handled the ending of the
true
series. So I don't have a lot of trust for her as an author. So
I feel like
yeah,
it definitely helps to have the two of them.
She needs somebody else to reel her in.
Sorry.
I will say too, like from a like I've read a lot of books about cons, like fantasy books about cons and heists and things, and like this, like Ren is the most incompetent con artist
I was waiting for
that I have ever read.
Really? I feel like she doesn't do a terrible job. I don't know.
Con artists need to know their mark. Like she doesn't know they're fucking poor. Like, how do you pick a mark and not know that they have no money? Like, you should know. Like,
okay,
and it's not even like they had hid it. They hadn't hid it. Like everybody else in the royal family or like the noble families all know that they're poor and on the decline. So like, she's clearly a terrible con artist.
Where she says like that poor is relative to her poor. Like there's because and I'm glad they called that out because I also was thinking the same thing. I was like, come on, Ren. But then there's a scene where she's like, if this is their version of poor, like this is luxury compared to what I've had.
Yeah,
but the Tremantis can't even
desperate thing for her too. Like it wasn't like a clearly planned out. It was like a kind of like a last ditch. Oh well, we could do this.
And you have that in. You have that in because the family, the
it didn't have clearly planned out. I don't think.
But okay, so here's the thing that, and like it is acknowledged in, and Ren acknowledges it in the second half of the book, but like Tess has the skills. They could have opened a dress shop and been rolling in the dough just from and like that whole, the whole thing about
but it's like a personal vendetta, Sarah. Like she's out there.
But she doesn't have any problem with the Tremantis. Like and the only reason she picked them is because she had been the lady's maid for the sister. And so like that's her in. So like I get that is like why she picked the family.
The noble families. Like I think she's it's kind of
but that doesn't even make sense because the noble families never did anything to her. Like when we find out her backstory of like what happened,
there's a lot that they've
but I mean,
done as again.
There's a lot of other ways you can. Yeah, I just thought it was the motivations were very slim and very dumb. And like, yes, the motivations are there and they are written out, but I'm sitting here going like, Ren, you are just kind of dumb. And like Tess is so much smarter and Tess should have been the brains of the operation. Like Tess can't lie to save her life, which is fine, but Tess has all these other skills and it's like you don't have to do something so risky that's going to get you executed.
I kind of thought it was fitting with her character, though, the way they set it up. And I don't want to get into details because they're going to be spoilery. But I think the second half sold it more for me in terms of it just being part of Ren's character, that she likes taking those risks and likes manipulating people and kind of playing with that. And that's something that she's kind of just made part of herself. So that she was doing dumb things and like things that didn't make a lot of sense, but for me, it was just part of who she was. So it didn't bother me.
She's not a good person.
No, I don't think you can make an argument that she's a good person. I like her a lot, but I would not say that she's a good person.
Yeah. Do we want to get into spoilers?
I have a
I was just going to say, we talked about world building. We talked about characters. We talked about pacing. We can't really talk about plot without spoiling.
No.
So are there
I think
other
I
things
wanna
we need to
know,
talk
though,
about non-spoiler?
like world
we're-
building related. Sarah, what did you think of the well, everyone else too, but especially because we know Sarah had issues with this in Lady Trent, that we all did as well, but like on a bigger scale. What did you think of like the queer normative and just the queerness of this book, and then also the colonialism? Because I think those were things Kristen was hoping you would like more. Kristen is not with us in this series versus that series.
Yeah. So the queer normative stuff I thought was well done in this book. I really did think that was way better handled in this than in the Lady Trent. I mean, the world in Lady Trent was not a queer normative world, so this one, I was totally okay with it. I mean, obviously, like, we don't really have any main characters who, like, because, like, I mean, there's stuff with Vargo, but I don't think that like, I wouldn't call him a bisexual character, if you will. Like, I think there's some history there that, like, obviously would be a little bit spoilery to get into, but so, like, I didn't really,
the closest to like a main, not a main,
as a main, a main
very
character that would be like actually queer, and so we're still kind of missing like that rep a little bit. Like, obviously there were lots of side characters and lots of different like little moments where we did get some cool queerness, and like even little details. Like, there was one comment about some other culture that was like, you know, there was no sons, so the daughter became a son, and like, so that's like interesting stuff that like like I love to see that kind of thing. The colonialism stuff, I do think it's interesting to have the kind of layers of the like different cultures in the city. I will say though that the vibes that I was getting from the Vrzenians was very much like Romani traveler, like what most people know the term gypsy, which is actually a derogatory term and should not be used. But and I'm not really sure how I feel about that as an influence without knowing more about the authors. Like, I can say fairly certainly that Marie Brennan has no connections to that community, but like particularly with the like the way that they dressed and like the tarot cards and like the mysticism and like some of that stuff. So I do have some questions. I think it was well done. I think it was like far enough away that like it's like, and the stripes are not necessarily there because the Vrzenians are very clearly like presented as like these people just want to live their lives and these overlords are like not letting them, kind of thing, which is a way better way to approach it than I think other books have used sort of the like gypsy stereotype. But yeah, I don't know if the second author, if they have any connections to that community. And I like, the reason that makes me feel a little bit weird is that I know that community, like the Romani, have been so like used in popular culture throughout time. And so, and I mean, like, obviously there's also other influences here. We have like the sort of like classical like Roman and Greek, like Latin and Greek influences, and we have the like Eastern European kind of feeling. Like, I mean, like the name Andrakya or whatever, like that's very, it's got that feeling of like a very like Eastern European kind of vibe to it. So it's kind of an interesting mix. I will say, because I felt that the world building was not very good, like not very well done, I have less kind of like concrete thoughts about it, because I really just felt like it was so info dumpy and so like overwhelming and so overly complicated that I kind of ignored it in a lot of ways. Like, it's not like
it didn't all
so
stick.
So yeah, exactly. It didn't all stick, and I didn't really care. Like, the setting could have been different and the story would have been the same. It's not like that, and I think that's part of where, like, when I compare it to other books that I have loved, like the Gentleman Bastard series, like that the first book, like the city feels more fantasy than this city. Like, Nadezra felt more grounded in the real world, which I kind of dislike. Like, the only thing, like
Do both of those have like a Venice related?
Yeah. So the only way, I mean, okay, so to be fair, in Gentleman Bastard, the only kind of Venetian feeling is it's like a city with canals, right? Like a city that's a bunch of islands and there's a lot of canals. Also, Notorious Sorcerer also has a Venetian inspired setting, though mixed with Constantinople or Istanbul, whatever the current, I can never remember which is the current name and which is the old name of that city. That's had numerous names over time. But so like, and that's another story that's not really, it's not really a heist story, but it is about, like, Notorious Sorcerer is about sort of a ne'er-do-well street kid kind of trying to get in, you know, trying to get back at the noble classes. And there's very much like that mix between like the nobles and the not nobles, the normal people. So I think that's one of the things where like the world building for me was just so meh in this that I don't really care about it as much. And like the characters, the politics, and the plot were really the things that for me made this a 4-star book.
Yeah, I think I want to see what happens in the other books in the series, because I feel like I was very interested in the world building, like kind of the different cultural groups, but I feel like I only got like a tiny bit of that. I got way more of the magic than I got of that, and I would have been way more interested in the cultures than in the magic, to be honest. So if they expand on that and make that more understandable in the second and the third books, then I'll get really on board. But it always makes me nervous when an author lays the groundwork for something like that, and I have no idea if they're going to deliver by the end. Especially because Lady Trent was one of those where it's like, I thought you were laying groundwork for a thing, and then you just threw it all away. So I don't have complete trust that all of the things that I'm interested in now will actually be delivered by the end. So I'm hoping.
Esme, who's in the comments or was earlier, has said that like it wraps up really well and that there's a lot of threads that tie in well, and that it almost is like the opposite of grimdark, I think she called it, because it's more of like a hopeful, but that kind of in that sense where like things come together. So hopefully it's better done. But yeah,
that makes me excited.
Yeah. I feel like Liar's Not kind of almost even more digs into the magic. I don't think it was as cultural from memory. My biggest thing with Liar's Not is like it introduces two different concepts again when we could have done one, and I think they're more magic related.
I will say what I did like that happens later on in the book is when you have the one character who's explaining the terms of like the tarot-based system via the Numenatria one, and Ren getting really annoyed with her for trying to like explain the magic system that she knows really well via this other lens. Like I thought that was fun. I liked that. But that was about the only time that I was glad we had both.
I forgot to mention
systems, which I wish we had two. Again, like I kind of think imbuing doesn't even do much at all, really.
I forgot to mention that in addition to the sort of like Romani influence, I also got some vibes of like Jewish culture in like the past in Europe, with like being kind of pushed to the side in certain neighborhoods and like not being allowed to engage. And I mean, like Judaism also has its own, not tarot, but there's the Kabbalah, I think it's called, which kind of is their own kind of mysticism thing. And then also with the like way that the leaders of the now I've forgotten the name of the culture that I'm trying to in the book, the what are they called again? That's the one. And how like the leaders are like, there's certain like, did they call them tribes? I can't even remember. Or clans. There's something.
I think it's clans.
And so like those the way that the leadership was kind of set up. So I mean I know that Marie Brennan has a background in anthropology, and I think that there is this.
The other author does as well.
Yeah. So there is a tendency, I think, when you have that background to like pull different things from different cultures and kind of mix them all together, which like I think when you look at some books, like if they're so beyond recognizable, then I think that's okay. Like if you pull like one element, but it can be tricky if like you start to create something that's kind of just like a weird twisted version of something that actually exists in the real world. And like particularly when I read because like I had the ebook, and so like glossaries and stuff don't really mean anything to me. But then when I picked up the second book, and I was starting at the beginning, and I read through the like pronunciation guide, and literally they're saying like pronounced like in this real world language. Like they've clearly based the names off of real world languages. And so like that obviously like there's a filter that you're putting things through in your head when you're creating these names and things that is linking them to a specific real world culture. And I just wish that authors would either do what Guy Gavriel Kay does, where like you heavily research an actual historical period and write your fantasy in that like very true to real history, like but add your magic or whatever, or just like make up your own shit and don't base it on real world. Like I think that's what I struggled with the Lady Trent series too. Was that,
I'm having deja vu.
Yeah.
It was too I hate that kind of world building. Like and that's just a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, I don't mind it as much, although I will admit that I didn't like some of what they did with the language stuff, because I'm used to like the SZ combo almost always being like a j sound. And so the fact that they picked like another letter to be that kept throwing me off while I was reading it, just because they were just switching around the combos. I almost wish they'd stuck. Like if you're going to pick one, stick with that. Like don't mix and match, because then it makes my brain like try and struggle to keep up with that.
I will say the words were pronounced very similar to what I thought they were in my head. So like at least they're the way they're written.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I was listening to audio and I think there was only one that was pronounced differently than what I thought originally. So
yeah, I immersion read. I think that helped.
Yes.
Sarah, you just read the ebook, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you didn't.
I did not have access
with all the
to
names
the audio.
and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's where for me too, like because of the way that I read, I don't really care about made up words. Like my brain kind of just skips over them and it like just remembers what it looks like. And like my brain is like, oh yeah, that's that word. And I know in my brain what the context is, but because I'm not like, and it's a weird thing to say, but okay, so this is a whole thing where like I didn't learn to read through phonetics. Like I know that that's strange, but when I was going to school, where I was going to school and how I learned to read was actually through sight reading, which is like a different way of learning to read, which has totally kind of screwed up my brain for reading phonetically. Like I had to learn how to read phonetically when I got older, because there are certain things that you come across, like especially reading fantasy, you're going to come across words that you've never seen before. And so like sight reading doesn't really help you if you're reading fantasy. And that's why they no longer teach kids from sight reading. Like that's not a thing, but it means I read way faster than normal people, or like people who learn reading phonetically. So, but the thing is like literally like, yeah, like names and stuff. It's the name that starts with the V. Like the Versenians or whatever. Oh, it's
my brain does that
Leado.
anyway.
It's the name that's
rather faster reading.
Yeah,
like
mine
does too.
Like it's just the shape of the word.
That's why it's really annoying when a book like all the names are V names, and then it's you can't differentiate.
Yes,
but I also hate when like in this one where they do 3 names for one thing. Like there's like all the houses and they all have a first name and a last name and the house name, and that represents this. I'm just like, give it one name. Like just give me one thing to reference. It's too many.
And that's where, like, for me too, because it's more the shape of the word that matters than the actual like letters. So if there is like multiple V names, it's like the shape of the name or like the length of the name or whatever. And then also context. Context is super important, where like I would know from context that, oh, it's that. And like sometimes I get confused and then I just keep reading anyway. This is the thing that like it'll sort itself out. I'll figure it out as I go. And I think that's why I can read books that are very confusing and they don't really bug me. Like why the Malazan Book of the Fallen series, like everyone's like, I don't understand what's going on. It's like half the time I don't know what's going on in books anyway. And I just figure it out. It's just, as I read, I just figure it out.
I'm not the only one. I'm like, am I supposed to understand everything that's happening? Because I don't.
No.
But I'm also Canadian and I probably learned to read the same way.
Yeah.
Probably,
I think if you try and understand everything at the beginning, it's too much effort. Just don't do it. Don't try and understand what's happening in the first couple 100 pages. Just roll with it, and eventually it might make sense.
Kind of the entire series, I feel like. Be okay with things being almost like they're
confused.
not soft magic system in the sense that like I think they all have very specific details thought out, but they feel like a soft magic system to my brain because I don't understand half of it.
Yeah.
Well, and the
I don't
amount of
think you need
effort
to.
required to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to for the plot and for the payoff. Like I don't think you have to understand everything. So it's fine.
Yeah.
But it can be
Well, and, like,
frustrating in the beginning.
But I think it's a hard entry point sometimes because
Yeah.
of that, because people feel like they should.
100%. Yeah.
We didn't see any like actual functioning magic until like 2/3 of the way into this book. Like I feel like
Yeah.
I feel like in the first half there's a lot of discussion of the magic and
Yes.
like it,
Yeah.
but we don't actually see any actual working of the magic, and that kind of bothers me because I feel like there were opportunities earlier on in the book where we could have had examples, particularly of the Numenatra. Like I feel like the tarot reading, like the Verzenian magic, the weave, is that what it's called? Something like that.
The pattern.
The pattern,
The
that's what
pattern,
it is.
yeah.
I knew it had
Yeah.
something to do with fabric and yeah. The pattern, like patterning or whatever. Like I feel like we get a little bit more of that because Ren is more intimately familiar with it, and like, but the Numenatra, because we're like so much in Ren's head for the first half of this book, for the most part, we don't really get to see what the Numenatra stuff is all about. But it's like all over the place, right? Like it's all these things like and that's the part that I didn't really like. It kind of reminded me of how like in Babel, like the whole magic system in Babel was like supposedly everywhere. Like every element of life is controlled by this thing, but like we don't actually get to understand what that thing is for like a very long time. Because if something's so important, like you need to show me, not just tell me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Anyways.
it's just harder to understand if you're not seeing it in action. Like,
Yeah.
you can explain it all you want, but until you actually see it functioning, that's going to be hard to wrap your brain around.
Yeah, I think that's why I took,
Well, and
like, there's one specific scene, and Kate knows the scene less, when I was like, okay, I like this. Before that, I was struggling. I was like, I'm not going to finish it on time.
I want to know
But
what
there's
scene.
we'll get to the spoilers.
Yeah,
Like,
no
okay,
spoilers,
now I'm into it. Now I get this, and we're moving along. But at first, I was like, ooh.
But I also want to say, for like anyone in the comments who doesn't know and is interested, there is a Kickstarter for the pattern tarot card deck that I think has like a little bit over a day left, which I think is really cool. I think that's my favorite form of magic in this series. I agree. Like the Numenatra, I don't fully get, but I love the pattern, and I love the idea that they actually like laid out cards and built the scenes around that. I think that's so cool.
I think the other thing that I would have liked more of in the world building was the religious aspect of the magic systems, because it seemed like the religion was kind of tied to these magic systems, but I never really got a good understanding. Like even when it's talking about like high holy days and stuff, and like some of the major events that happen in the second half of the book really relate to those like holy days kind of things, and like the whole thing about like the face and the mask, I don't think that was clearly enough explained from the Verzenian perspective of like, and then like the fact that it seems like they share a pantheon of gods, but it's a little confusing, and I don't even understand who the pantheon of gods is. Like the religion was just kind of all over the place for me. And I love fantasy religions. That's like one of my favorite things in books, is when you have a really cool pantheon and like a really well thought out religious system. And I just felt like that kind of let me down because they were so focused on like the Numenatra thing. Like I could have done without that in this whole book. Like just
that's also
that.
related to the gods. Like even that, there's one mention where it's like, which one do I inscribe which god is more likely? So like even that could have been embellished with the gods, and then maybe both would have been stronger.
Yeah, they were trying to do too much setup.
Yeah,
I think so. They didn't focus enough on any one elements. They were just introducing everything,
and it's kind of like a common thing for them, I think. Yeah.
Well, and then like the fencing having the same words of like, you know, like the words that connected to the Numenatra. I wanted more fencing. I really wanted the Rook like Zorro.
I love that.
all weaponry and all fencing.
I was so excited. Like that's where I felt fully invested, was when they finally had the scene with the fencing master in the house, where I was finally like, oh, this is fun. Okay, because that's where stuff started happening that I cared a little more about. So
yeah.
Well, we're 45
that whole
minutes in,
section.
Not even at the spoilers.
I know.
Spoilers at 45 minutes. Okay, but
do
we need to talk about
before
October first.
Yes. Yeah. So October for our pick It is my turn, because what we started last year, we each got a turn to pick a book. And previously we had been doing where we kind of did our own poll in our, just like with the co-hosts, but we're going to change things up this year. We're going to try something different. So I have 5 books that I have chosen. The co-hosts have seen them already, like, so this is not surprising to any of them, because I actually started with 20 books and I had to whittle it down to 5.
Of
But what we're going to do is I'm going to announce those 5 books right now, and then all of us will post on our community tabs and we'll put it in the Discord so that all of you who are joining us for these book club discussions and things can have a say. So you'll be able to vote for one of the 5 books. You can vote on each of our community tabs and in the Discord. You can, vote as many places as you want. Don't worry about that. That's how it's exactly the same as how we chose the Mask of Mirrors. Hopefully that makes sense. The 5 books, I'm going to read a little bit about each of them in case you have never heard about them. So book number 1, option number 1, is Gideon the Ninth. This is the first book in the Locked Tomb series by Tamsin Muir. This is always described as lesbian necromancers in space. This is how I hear this described all the time. I'll read you a little bit of the description here. The Emperor needs necromancers. The 9th necromancer needs a swordswoman. Gideon has a sword, some dirty magazines, and no more time for undead bullshit. That's all I'm going to read you. You can go to the Goodreads and check that out.
I think that's another
I have not read
where you
this.
just go with things and like let them be explained later, right? From what
It's
I know.
one of my favorites of all time,
I
but
was gonna say,
expect
Kate
confusion.
loves that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Kate
It's probably my
and-
favorite series ever.
And Kristen from
Yeah.
Kristen is Fully Booked have both
Fully
read
Booked.
it. So it would be a reread for some of our members. But I think
that's
that it would
fun.
be a fun read. It is
Have you reread
science
it, Kate?
fiction
Hmm?
more
Have
than
you read it only once?
I've read it like 4 times. But I'm always up
What's
for
another
another.
time? What's a 5th reread?
it's science fiction, right, Kate?
Yes.
It's not fantasy. It's science fiction, or
It is
kind
not
of a mix of both?
really fantasy, but it's not hard sci-fi. It's kind of somewhere in the middle.
Okay, so that is choice number 1. Choice number 2, this is called Strange Practice by Vivian Shaw. It is another start of another series called the Dr. Greta Helsing series. And this one is about Greta Helsing, who has inherited her family's very specialized and highly peculiar medical practice. So she treats the undead for a host of ills: vocal strain in banshees, arthritis in barrow-wights, and entropy in mummies. Then one day, this sect of murderous monks emerges and is killing humans and undead Londoners alike. And Greta has to use her unusual skills to stop the cult if she hopes to save her practice and her life. So this is like urban fantasy. It's got spooky vibes because this is for October. So I think there's probably all kinds of spooky creatures and things in this. Helsing, if you haven't heard that name, that's from Dracula, Van Helsing. But this is set in the modern day, is my understanding. It's shorter, 320 pages. So yeah, that's option number 2, bit of a wild card. This is one that's been on my TBR for a long time and I haven't got to it. Book number 3 is House of Salt and Sorrows by Aaron A. Craig. You may have heard of this one because the sequel companion book, I don't know if it's a direct sequel, but there's another one that just came out that's like House of Roots and Ruin, I think is what it's called. This is a retelling of, what is the fairy tale in this one?
12 Dancing Princesses.
There you go.
I've read that one. I love it.
And so this is like gothic fantasy. So I'll read a little bit of the description here. So in a manor by the sea, 12 sisters are cursed. Annalie lives a sheltered life at Highmoor, a manor by the sea, with her sisters, their father, and stepmother. Once they were 12, but loneliness fills the grand halls now that 4 of the girls' lives have been cut short. Each death was more tragic than the last: the plague, a plummeting fall, a drowning, a slippery plunge, and there are whispers throughout the surrounding villages that the family is cursed by the gods. Disturbed by a series of ghostly visions, Annalie becomes increasingly suspicious that the deaths were no accidents. Her sisters have been sneaking out to attend glittering balls, dancing until dawn in silk gowns and shimmering slippers, and Annalee isn't sure whether to try to stop them or join their forbidden trysts. Sounds very intriguing. Sounds also very spooky, very gothic.
Perfect.
And I thought
Perfect for
the
October.
timing was right. I tried to read this once before. I've read like the first 2 chapters. I think I did a try a chapter, and it really intrigued me. I don't know why I never kept reading it, but that I'm very excited for as well as an option. And then we have The Goblin Emperor by Catherine Addison, another one that Kate has read.
I read
I
that
don't know if
review.
and
Maria
Maria's
read
read
that
it too. Okay.
But
And so
it's one
this
I
is
feel like helps with reread. Like there's a lot to dig into.
Yes, agreed.
so this one is the start of another series, though again I think it's more like a loose series, and the other books are kind of like companion books as opposed to direct sequels. This is about the youngest half-goblin son of the emperor, who has lived his entire life in exile, distant from the imperial court and the deadly intrigue that suffuses it, when his father and 3 sons in line for the throne are killed in an accident. He has no choice but to take his place as the only surviving rightful heir. Unschooled in the art of politics, he has no friends, no advisors, and the sure knowledge that whoever assassinated his father and brothers could make an attempt on his life at any moment. Surrounded by sycophants eager to curry favor, and overwhelmed by the burdens of his new life, he can trust nobody. Amid the swirl of plots to depose him, offers of arranged marriages, and the specter of the unknown conspirators who lurk in the shadows, he must quickly adjust to life as the Goblin Emperor. So this one I've heard described as like it's a cozy vibe, but very political, which I think is like an interesting juxtaposition of things, because usually when I think of political, I don't think of cozy.
It's also a little
interesting.
all vibes, no plot, but like in a way that I love.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see if Sarah actually would classify it as cozy, because
As
we know
cozy?
they have strong opinions.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we do,
we
right?
know
Yeah,
they have
strong
strong
opinions
opinions
about
about cozy.
My final pick is very much a wild card pick. This is a straight up horror novel. If we all know
Ooh.
me, I do not read horror, but this is called Gilded Needles. And this is by the author Michael McDowell, who actually is passed away. And he's best known for writing horror, but also if you're not like a big horror fan, you might have heard of that little movie Beetlejuice. He wrote that. So that kind of when I learned that about this author, I was like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. This book, Gilded Needles, is about, well, I'll just read the description because I'm not really super clear. I do know that it is like historical in nature. It is set in the Gilded Age in New York. So German Black Lena was queen of the Black Triangle, Manhattan's decadent empire of opium dens, gambling casinos, drunken sailors, gaudy hookers, and backroom abortions. With her daughters and grandchildren, Black Lena led a ring of consummate female criminals, women skilled in the art of cruelty. Only a few blocks away, amidst the elegant mansions and lily-white reputations of Gramercy Park and Washington Square, lived Judge James Stallworth. He was determined to crush Lena's evil crew, and with icy indifference, he ordered 3 deaths in her family. Then, one Sunday, all the Stallworths receive individual invitations to their own funerals. Black Lena was vowed a reign of revenge. Can even the Stallworth fortune and awesome power save them from her diabolical lust for revenge? Like, this is very much a wild card. When I heard about this book, I was like, it sounds really interesting. And I really want to read it, but like if we don't want to read it for the book club, I also totally get that. I will still be reading this in October. It will be on my TBR for October, regardless of if we read it together. But it's like straight up horror, and I don't usually read horror. The only horror I've ever read is like T. Kingfisher, which I feel like is not even like really horror.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's on the
I'd
edge.
like to just take a moment for like my character growth this year, because I also never read horror, and now I'm open to it. So go me.
Yay! And it's the point. Push us out of our comfort zone.
Right?
There you go. And then Kristen happens to be wearing a Beetlejuice.
Yeah, exactly. When I saw that he had written Beetlejuice, like that was one of the things that I was like, oh wow. And like one of the reasons too that I was like, this is kind of interesting is so so Michael McDowell, the author, he passed away in 1999, and he died of an AIDS-related illness. And so like he hasn't written anything in a very long time, but like even Stephen King has said that he was like one of the finest writers of paperback originals in America for like horror. And he has a whole bunch of other stuff. And I figured if we were ever going to read a horror, it should probably be in October.
Yeah.
Yes. Dev.
And since it's historical horror, like it's set in a historical time period, I think that's a little better for me, because I think
Yeah.
part of my reason why I don't like contemporary horror or horror set in like the real world is that my imagination is too good. And if I read horror set in like today, then I'm going to like start thinking that there are serial killers coming to get me at all times.
So hold on. I have a question, because
Mhm.
even I've lost track, so I'm sure people in the comments have
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Are we reading September, discussing in October, or reading October, discussing in November? I think.
Oh, that's a
discussing
good
in
question.
October, right?
It's
We're
reading
discussing-
in October, right?
See, all of us don't know. That's my.
So we read Mask of Mirrors in August. Discussed in September. We read in October, discuss in
Discuss in
November.
November. Yes.
Okay.
Which makes sense. So you're reading the spooky book, because they all kind of have, or cozy, I guess. They all have October vibes in
Yeah.
So read in
October.
vote this month, read next month, discuss in
Discuss in November.
Discuss. And I mean, if
that
we
makes
can get
sense.
our shit together to discuss like at the end of October, then we
It's
could
us,
do that. But it is us. It is
Yeah.
us. Like,
No more need.
I mean, November, the first weekend in November, like Halloween is a Tuesday this year. So if we discuss the first weekend in November, it's only like the 4th. So
Yeah,
that's
you're still
not
into it. Yeah.
I
I'm
feel
not
like
ready
that
for
would be
Christmas yet.
4th or 5th. Yeah.
No.
Well,
I
might
put
be,
my
but-
tree up November 1st. No, my
But
husband.
we're Canadian. We're Canadian. We've already had Thanksgiving.
Yeah, Thanksgiving's in October for us. So
Fair enough.
We have Thanksgiving before Halloween.
there are arguments, though, in Canada that we should wait until after Remembrance Day, which we have on November 11th, which I don't know if there's an American equivalent. I presume you probably do something to remember
Memorial
like
Day?
veterans.
Memorial Day, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some people get mad if you start Christmas before Remembrance Day, but
I put them up,
We
but I
already
don't turn
had
the
that.
lights on.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just get
you
mad
have-
at Thanksgiving.
we have Memorial.
do you have
Day.
a holiday? Oh, November is your Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah.
Thanksgiving is in
Yeah.
November. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so no Christmas stuff for some people. No Christmas stuff till after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
That's too late for us. That's too late for
That's
us.
the problem, is that then you start doing everything December 1st. You have it only up by like the 15th.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know how
We
to struggle.
we do in my house try to get the Christmas tree up in November so that it can be up, and then we keep it up like November, December, January, and we take it down at the end of January because I love
Yeah.
Christmas.
It's a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah, it is pretty
Anywho,
long.
on
I
this
do. I
tangent.
love Christmas. Yes, so we have now announced the books.
An hour. Not on spoilers yet.
So
Well,
let's
we're
get to
working our way there.
spoilers.
Oh
Like
yeah.
holidays,
Veterans Day. Veterans Day.
Okay, spoilers. Do you want to put a thing on the screen,
Do I
Kristen?
have a banner? God, I'm not prepared for this. I was not
You're
prepared.
the only
I do.
one who can put a
I
banner.
am.
wouldn't-
I am prepared.
go.
Look at me.
Yeah.
Well done.
Spoilers. Finally.
Kristen, what scene convinced you?
It's the dream sequence scene, and that took a while to get to. But as soon as we got to, and then
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was devastating. It was devastating. But I thought that whole scene, it was so cool. I'm like, okay, I get what this is. I get where we're
Okay,
going.
wait. Are you talking about the first dream sequence scene at the like when they drink the drink and then she slips into the other world? Okay.
Mhm.
Because there's also because I was confused when I was reading in the Discord because there's also like the dream sequence when Vargo goes into the dream to pull her soul out.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
that's like much later. And so I was a
That's
little
later,
bit
yeah.
confused.
No, it's the first
Yeah.
one with the drink. That's my
With
that was my.
the horrible loss.
It was horrible.
I was devastated. I have not cried that much in a book in
Kate
a long
actually
time.
cried.
I will say that much.
It didn't make me cry. I was like,
love it.
okay, bye,
Leado.
Leado.
Yeah, I love Leado so
Mhm.
I
much.
loved him too.
Me too.
I don't know. I felt like when at the very beginning when I was like, oh, could he be the Rook? And then I thought maybe he had hidden depths, but he actually didn't. He was actually he was very shallow in his like even like when Serato, but I mean kind of like Serato when they have that interaction and like it turns out that he's not really trying to find out who killed Kolya. He's really just more in it for his own family's benefit. And I was like, that makes sense for Leado. Like he's a privileged kid and like it made sense for his character, but I was kind of like, oh, he doesn't have hidden depths. And then by that point too, like I think they were really building up Vargo as like the character that had the interesting depths to them. So
yeah, I just liked Leado as like the kind of trying to do his best for like that mix of not really being able to live up to what his mom wants from him, and then like trying to keep the family safe. So I liked him, especially once it got into the fencing and that scene with him and Metzen. I enjoyed very much. I think I enjoyed Leado the most when he was interacting with his sister or the fencing master. Like, it felt like he was just doing his best to protect people in those scenes versus some of the other ones. But I don't know. I just like that archetype, I guess.
I kind of took it as him trying to do best by everyone. So, like, yes, it was about his house because that was the more pressing and actual current, but also he would want to help figure out what happened to Kolya and like help Gray because that was a loss they both experienced. Like, I kind of took it as like he was trying to just do it all and failing a little bit, but
I did like that he seemed to genuinely like embrace Ren as part of the family, like even before his mom did. Like that was something that I liked about him, that he was willing to be like, we're so small, like we need, she's coming, and like he wasn't as willing to think poorly of her the way that the mother was. What is the mother's name again? I can't remember her name now.
Deny.
Denai?
And
Denaya.
Deny. I'm like, one person has to say it. And then what's the sister's something with a G?
Juna,
yeah.
I only know because I read this literally yesterday. I'll forget.
You read it yesterday.
Yeah, because that's the thing where like I think like the mother also was a very interesting character, which we didn't talk about in the non-spoiler section, because I thought that like the whole curse thing. Okay, can we talk about why that didn't end up being important in the end? Like they blow back the curse. They blow back the curse on someone, but then like it doesn't matter in this book. And I was like, what the? What?
Yeah, you need to read book 2, I'm guessing.
Yeah, huge in book 2.
Well, that's good, because I was that's another one of those loose threads, and I was like, I hope this is going to come back, because I want to know why Ren is involved. Like, why is she involved in this curse?
Yeah, like they're all cursed.
I know Sarah from A Voyage Through Worlds talked about like doing a reread recently as well, and had read also Labyrinth's Heart, and said that there were a lot of things that feel like plot holes or loose threads that actually are just picked up on later on. So
I'm so glad they're going to pick that up later on, because it would just be so annoying if they didn't circle back.
Well, and it's like Alceus as well is like a loose thread, and
also book 2.
Yeah, that's like, okay, this is very weird. Like obviously there's things that we don't know, and this is the other thing that is kind of annoying when you have this kind of POV setup that was in this book, where like we really like we know everything that Ren knows. I think that's fair to say. Like we're very much in Ren's head, and very much like what she knows we know. But then when you get to the other characters, like we know some of what Vargo knows. We know some of what the like other characters know, but not all. And I think
that's why Ren's felt so info dumpy, because it's like we know what she's thinking of. So half the time it's like she has to be thinking of a specific thing in order for us to get that knowledge. Whereas with Vargo, they're specifically withholding it. So he's like thinking in reference. Like there's moments where he like references Alceus in a way that later on makes sense, but when you don't have the information, doesn't. And so I think they're trying to do that like differently with those two.
Well, and that's where if you have two authors writing, like that's Marie Brennan's style, is
true
to also really be in the character. And what's the other author's last name?
Helms.
And they
don't
write
think there's anything about Ren that's supposed to be a secret. Like that's also I think the goal of the characters. Whereas
Vargo, but there are some things that are revealed about how like her childhood and stuff that we don't know right off the bat, that like we get, like the fire and like the things that we learn in the dream sequence, basically.
Yeah.
Like
but
her
like
kind of
repressing rather than secret.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Because like she's kept them, she's almost like buried them so deep inside herself that they only come out when she's in that like dream sequence. Like all the stuff with her mother
vulnerabilities is kind of how I look at it.
I was confused at first too about the whole like sibling thing where like I thought that they were like blood siblings and then
too.
it wasn't revealed until like later on that her siblings were like they did it through like a
A blood
I don't even
bond or
know
Blood
whatever.
oath.
blood
Yeah,
oath thing.
but-
Yeah.
Yeah, same here on
And we're-
first read, that I thought they were siblings. And then I'm also
Me too.
this read, I was confused because Leado and Ren or Renata are cousins, like theoretically. Like there is
He
a
thinks.
very
Yeah.
loose, but there is a blood tie. And so I know this like blood ties don't matter, but what is with that romance that's like semi-brewing?
Yeah,
I think that's
Because it's supposed to be like historical. Like, is that?
I
I think
felt
yeah.
weird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like cousins, though they are first cousins, which is pretty close. But I
Close.
mean,
In
if
actuality,
you-
they're not, but
They're not.
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
But they think because
They
she's
know
not in the book or whatever, it doesn't matter. But like, you
Yeah.
still think that that's
I think
related through
though
blood.
too,
Mhm.
like if it seemed to me like the culture, the way it was set up for the noble families was that like because they're all about hoarding power and wealth, marrying a cousin to keep
it.
something in the family like would make sense. Like to be
well,
like
they don't
so
care as much about blood ties. They care
Yeah.
about like you're
Yeah.
only actually a cousin if you're in the register. You're
In
not
the register,
actually
yeah.
blood
what I'm
related.
thinking.
Doesn't matter. But
Yeah.
like as a
Yeah.
reader, it was weird. So
yeah.
That definitely wasn't the relationship I was rooting for.
yeah,
That was one thing actually about this book that I wanted more spiciness, I think, from the relationships in this. The relationships really felt a little flat and a little like and I mean part of that could be that Ren is like so emotionally unavailable because she's like a horrible human being who has all of this crap in her past. But but like it did kind of feel like even when she sort of started getting interested like with Vargo later in the book, like it didn't feel believable to me.
It felt believable to me, but only because like she clearly wasn't sure she wanted to trust anyone that much. So like it was believable to me that she would be physically attracted to Vargo and potentially be interested because they're working together so closely, but it didn't ever delve any deeper than that. It didn't feel like to me. Like it was just a potential in this book. So I'm curious what they do in the rest of the series.
I'm gonna keep quiet because I know
Yeah.
who the romance is with, and also
Yeah, because
who
I wasn't
wanted
sold.
it to be with. Yeah, so
So whoever I want to be with, Maria will want the other person. If that's the trend. Because that's what happened in Lady Trent. Remember, you were obsessed with
I
the
wanted
one husband.
the romance to be a different type of representation than it was. Is all I'll say. I should have.
Oh, interesting.
Stop there. We can talk second book.
Yeah, I
But
don't have anything
do
to
like-
say because I don't really care about the romances in this book, to be honest. Like that is part of also probably why I gave it 4 instead of 5 stars because if it had had a stronger romance.
Well, I wasn't
I
even
think it
sure
was
that
up
we
more.
were going to get a romance. I thought it was going to be like just that's not where this is going to go. But then there was like hints that she could have romances with so many people because it was all about how beautiful she was. Everybody talked about she's one of those characters, right? She's so gorgeous, and then she can so easily hide. Like she puts on a different outfit and she's like blends in with everybody else. That was a bit, but she's stunning and beautiful. That everybody wanted her. You know what I mean?
Well,
She's
she
one of
had
those-
makeup. She had makeup that made her
But how
look
much is
different.
makeup?
And it kind of sounded like it was magical makeup. It was imbued.
Yeah,
so she would
yeah.
put
I
on
was
like
I was like, how
the
much
darker
makeup?
skin, like the
They
makeup,
changed
and it
her
would make her
skin
skin
color
look
slightly.
darker or make her
Mhm.
skin look lighter, which I mean,
like
there's-
emphasized elements
Oh
of
yeah,
like
that's a little bit.
jaw lines and
Yeah.
cheekbones and yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like that there was the emphasis on her beauty because then there's the moment later on where she gets recognized kind of for, I don't know that conniving is the right word, but like she's recognized for using intelligence. And that's the part she actually appreciates that compliment. She doesn't really care about the beauty because the beauty is essentially just a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And I like when they kind of explore that. So it did feel like they recognized her beauty a lot, but that it wasn't important to Ren necessarily.
I get that we talked about her being incompetent in like decision making, but I liked her ability to put on personas, which is I think where I think of her as competent. Like the fact that she interacts with so many different characters and they don't recognize her in different versions of herself, and that she puts on different accents and different mannerisms and changes her face and the imbuing magic. Like I liked all of that built into it.
Yeah, I don't know that I'd agree that she's incompetent necessarily. She makes mistakes, for sure. But I don't know that I'd agree.
So
that
I think my problem though is like literally, if you are a con artist, your job is to know your mark, and she did not know her mark. So that is why I said she was an incompetent con artist. I think that being an actor and being able to like put on the different personas is a different skill than being able to run a con. And I think she was really bad at running her con. She got way too involved with the people. She didn't know her mark. She didn't have like the thing with her bank, like the fact that she borrowed money and then didn't have any way to pay it back. Like she should have been running other cons to pay, because that's a huge flaw, because as soon as it got back to the Tremontis family,
I think she didn't take
it's like a red flag.
Yeah.
And so there were all these things that like she did not like. From a con artist perspective, she was very bad at pulling the con. I will say though, it seems like it was her first con, and that she was more of like a street pickpocket running like small cons on the street. Like it talks about the thing, like what they do to the one woman who like Mezin's side piece there, where she like cons her, and like those little like street cons are very different than the level of con that she's trying to pull here. And so I will give you that she like
cons, but in a very like Andrakia plotted it and then she executed. So like I agree with that.
Yeah. So I think that's where like it really bothered me that like she didn't know that the Tremontis were poor for the nobles, right? Like they couldn't even afford to buy coal to heat their home. Like they were literally existing on a level where like they were getting ready to sell the jewels. Like and that's the thing where it's like you need to do better if you're going to be a con artist. And I didn't buy the vendetta. The vendetta against the rich didn't make sense to me. Like there was nothing that the rich had done to her. Like whereas at Vargo, at least, it seems like he was forced into selling his body, which seems like a way more like reason to be angry and want to get back at the nobles if like he had to sell his body and be abused by nobles physically in his body, like versus this idea of like, well, I was poor and therefore I hate rich people.
Like, I think for me, it was kind of the idea that I also, to be fair, don't understand when people kind of go to war for their country, like this loyalty to this bigger entity that like, to me, I personally don't have that same level of like connection to, I think. And so it felt that same way where it's like the Rosenian people just have always felt like what was theirs was taken from them and they are put down by the society of like the Leganti. And so it was just like this like vendetta on behalf of her people and how they had been treated.
But she doesn't even have good links to her people is the thing. Like she's literally cut off from her people because she doesn't have that shawl to connect, and her mother had been kicked out. So she was never even part of the Brezenian culture to have that. Whereas like, at least with Serrato, you see that like he is upset because of the fact that the Brezenians are treated like shit in like practicality. Whereas like for Ren, like she was what, like 8 when her mother died or something like that. Isn't that what it says? She was like very little. And so the culture that she effectively grew up with was the street culture, the street thieving and like the fists, whatever. I can't remember what they were called. And like that was what she grew up with. And then and I mean also though, like she left at what, like 15 to go to Alwyn, but
I think her thing is like she doesn't belong anywhere, so she clings to where she wants to belong. Like she doesn't belong to a knot because she betrayed them, and she doesn't belong to Brezenian culture because of like her being half blood. And so like I think she kind of almost wants to create that for herself.
Yeah, that's the way it felt to me. Is like just because you don't have the connection, especially in the second half where she talks about like that shawl is important to her because it's a link to her mother, but also a potential link to this group that she's excluded from birth. And like she clearly wants to be part of that and like grew up with that knowledge. So for me, it was believable that she might, like, I don't think vendetta is necessarily the first thing on her mind with that, but it would influence you because you want that. To me,
it just seems so much more selfish to me than that. Like it felt really more like she just wanted to be able to have the, like, not wealth for the sake of wealth, but like this idea of like she had, like, because she had spent 5 years in Alwyn
thinks she wants. Like she goes into
Yeah, that's what she says.
and then she falls in love with the family, and really she just
Very
wants
quickly
family. Like she really just wants somewhere to belong.
They
Yeah, I
put
think
her in
that's
the
But
what
she
it
has her
and she
family, and
says
especially
no.
when the brother is not dead. Like that's the thing is like, why don't the three of you just get the fuck out of here and go live happily ever after?
Well,
Yeah,
because they
even
don't
the
have any
story.
security, though. I mean, like, it gets brought up in that second half that, like, what she really wants is security and safety. And, like, she sees wealth as a path to that. And that's why she cares about the wealth, not because she actually cares about the money.
But
So,
she even
like,
talked about how the difference in like poverty versus being a poor noble, and like she had enough. She could like the money that she took from the bank. Like Tess says it. Open a damn dress shop. There are other options available to you. And I mean, like, there's obviously other complications that arise in the second half of this book, like, particularly after she gets drugged and then they find out that Andrakya is out to get them and whatever, which, like, honestly didn't really make sense to me. Like, how Andrakya became this
Gamma lindworm.
that's the word. Sorry, I was trying to remember what it was. And, like, it just seemed kind of out of left field a little bit when that was revealed, and I was kind of like okay, now we understand why the kids are kind of connected or whatever, but it was very,
I feel
don't know,
like the prologue, I knew she was still around. Because they make a point of leaving. They make a point of leaving before she dies, right? Like they're saying she's dying anyways, we gotta go. I'm like, there's a reason for that. Come on. That's quite obvious. But I didn't think it would be quite that way. But yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really like her. I was just talking about this in one of the Discord groups. Some people really like her as a villain, and I'm not really interested in her except as a foil for Ren. I like that she represents what Ren could be if she goes fully into the selfish, using people as tools side of herself that she could be. I like her in that, but she just feels kind of almost cartoonish to me as a villain in that, where like she's just a monster by the end. It's just not that interesting. But
and I said that in the same chat. She kept calling her daughter, so I'm thinking that's something that
I am curious about that.
Yeah, like why is she is that just like because that's how she feels about all these children that she's, or is there something more? Like why does she keep calling her daughter? I think that's interesting, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that like really it's the loyalty. I think like she represents more themes and like you were saying a foil than she does an actual character herself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and like all that stuff.
Can you hear my child screaming? Okay.
No.
My child is having a tantrum downstairs, but she's with my husband, so.
No, can't hear.
Okay. Yeah, I think too, like the Rook, we have to talk about the Rook, right? And the Rook reveal. And I'm really hopeful that in the second book, we spend way more time with the Rook, because I really felt like in this book, like Serato, he's an interesting character, though I didn't really like him when he was being him. I liked the Rook, but I did not like Serato, because I felt like
they don't focus on him as much, because if you did, you would figure it out.
You start to guess.
Yeah, it's definitely.
But it's like it's the sections that he's in, like, because I just don't think I understood him, and I think knowing that he's the Rook, then it'll make more sense in the second book, because like his motivations again are a little like why did he join the military group?
Hawk.
Like like why did he join that? And then also like he's working himself to the bone trying to like figure out all of these things, and like because he cares, like especially like the street kids thing where he wants to make, he feels that he has to protect the people, like that's very clear, like he has that very much like I'm going to protect these people, and you see that in multiple points, which is like obviously like why didn't I think he was the Rook earlier? I don't know, but because he clearly cares deeply about the people, particularly of like the poorer neighborhoods, and like during the big riots when he's like, let me deal with it, like don't like let me try and figure this out kind of thing. But it didn't really make sense to me why he was in the Hawks, like what, like because he doesn't really have power in the Hawks very much. Like you can kind of see,
I think it's like wanting to change the system from the inside, sort of.
I have to be right back. My child.
Yeah, I can hear now. Yeah.
Okay, just give me a sec. I'll be back.
Okay.
Were any of
was
you
that?
sad that it wasn't like a female character? Because there was that level of like it could be anyone under the cloak.
Not really, because I didn't buy that it could be a woman. It felt like a
Yeah, I
throwaway
never considered that.
because everything else seemed to lead to it being a man. That like it.
Yeah.
I mean, like you could have pulled that out of the hat. It just didn't. It didn't feel like that's the way they were leaning.
And of all the female characters that we met, who would it be?
I mean, the fencing master briefly.
That was the only one
that
I could have considered. But I don't even think that character was on page enough to really.
I will say this is like one of, now that you know who it is, when talking about the book becomes impossible because you're like, do I say Ren, Vargo, Gray, and the Rook? Do I like, even in one of the like Kickstarter tweets that the authors were talking about, they were like, we're gonna do a card for the Rook and the Rose, and then we're gonna do one for Alceus and Vargo. And I was like, does that give it, like, maybe I'm reading it too much into it. But I feel like every time I talk about it in a video, I was always like, shoot, am I being too obvious with who I'm like naming?
I know it's hard. It's fun, but I do like that Ren doesn't know who the Rook is, because I thought by the end she would know. So I like that we know about her, but she doesn't know. Yeah. And that he's like, and I kind of like that.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I liked that she made Sedge start to question it too. Like her.
Yeah, I love that, and he was like, "There's no way, there's no way," and she was like, "Yeah, I love that too."
I enjoyed that. Yeah, I'm so scared for Sedge now. I'm gonna be honest, like so scared for Sedge. After Leado, it's like you can't take Sedge away. So
I'm so glad Sedge.
But you know they're not afraid to kill people. So.
I know.
Also, my heart broke when Sedge was like, realized that her and Tess had been together and he had been all alone.
Like she's alive.
Well, and that end too, where he like gets cut out of the knot because he protects her instead of Vargo. Like, screw you, Vargo.
His loyalties.
I kind of like Vargo. Yeah.
Love that. I want more Sedge POVs. I feel like I don't think we get as many of them as I want.
Oh, I think the same with Tess too. Like I feel like we could get more from both.
I love,
And then Tess being like duped by that guy. What's his name?
Pavlin.
But he's obviously into her, but I'm like, oh, sad.
And that's a trans character too, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't catch that the first read. I like completely missed that.
Yeah, because it's not focused on, which is actually kind of nice. I like that that it's just kind of like part of who that character is. So that was fun. I hope more of that comes up though, because it's like I don't want that to be the end for you guys. Like I want
no, it can't be. It can't be.
I want Tess to get her romance.
Yeah, because there was one moment where she's like, "I'll go ask him," and it's like, "Oh, I can't because they're a hawk." Do you guys? I was like, "No."
Ship, what's her name? Juna and Sibiliat at all?
Not at all.
Is that the
I want to know what Sibiliat's
up to. Friend? Why did I think that she was like really the person's daughter and she's been calling them this whole time? I'm like, there's something going on where she's like shady herself.
Weird with her.
Weird, yeah.
I'm like, there's something going on because why is she so hung up?
Caring, but like, it's like, are you using her? Are you?
That's what I thought the whole time
for her. Like what?
It feels like she's using her, but it's so hard to know because her reactions don't really make a lot of sense. Like I assume they'll circle back to it at some point, but like it just doesn't make sense because she's just jealous for the sake of being jealous. It doesn't feel like there's a point.
I think it's meant to be that she's like a manipulative person but has a soft spot for Juna, but that's not how it comes across.
No.
Yeah, it really doesn't.
And I think because Juna's so kind of naive, so like anybody around her like that, you feel like she's being taken advantage of, right? So like she's getting a little bit more strength as it goes on, but even like she quickly caves and gives Ren the mattress in 2 seconds. She's like, I know you're lying to us, but here's a mattress and some coal.
So it was like it was so cute to see her like try and be tough.
She tried her best. But as soon as she left the house, she's like, send her a mattress. I'm like, that
I was so mad at Denia this time around because she's so mean to Juna. Like she having a preference and treat your kids equally. And then suddenly he dies and Juna is important. Yeah. Like I think I didn't like Denia this time around, whereas last time I liked her a lot more. This time
she grows on me because she grows to care about Ren more.
And she opens up a little. She's so protective at the beginning, and then you kind of see her open up a bit. but she's still like, as Ren
Like,
points out, like,
in just Juna's avenue. Like, she doesn't do anything to stop Leado. She completely just, which is like a very, I guess, realistic thing, but
it felt kind of like standard for the culture that they're in, that she would be way more protective of her daughter.
Yeah.
All good, Sarah?
Yeah. We'll see how long the calm lasts. So I told my daughter, I said, if you need me, you have to knock on the door before you come in, because I don't want her on the internet. So I don't want her on camera. So. But she's in her bedroom and calming down. Oh, goodness. 4-year-olds, I tell ya. So what did I miss?
We were just talking about some of the side characters, like Juna, and a bit of
Tess. And that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then Danaya's treatment of Juna.
Yeah, that was interesting to me, that like she seemed to clearly be sheltering her, but like the why didn't really make sense, because marrying her off would have been a good way to like get their family back into a more like privileged position. So clearly she loves her daughter, and maybe that was her way of sheltering her, but like, or like keeping her safe kind of thing. I just, the relationship that what is her name? Juna?
Yeah, according to the audiobook, it's Juna.
Yeah.
That she had with that other, the other girl from the other house. Was very weird, and like I could not like, that's got to be a thread that picks up in book 2, because I do not understand where that is going.
Yeah, we were talking about how we don't know if it's like manipulation. Is she using her? Does she have a soft spot for her? Like, it doesn't clearly come across.
Yeah, for sure.
And then Kristen had some theories about.
Sounds like she's like a con artist herself. She's like a scammer, and now she's mad that another scammer is coming in and taking her spot. I'm like, something's happening here. This person is shady.
Well, and she does mention like having the same tactics, and that's why like Juna ever gets suspicious of Ren, is because Sibylla points out that the things she's doing could just be manipulation. So maybe there's a point to that. Like, maybe she's not necessarily, she could be a con artist, or she could just be trying to manipulate Juna and doesn't appreciate somebody else
doing it
on her territory.
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking.
Do we want to talk about theories for book 2? Because I have some theories for book 2.
Yeah, I want to hear. I don't have many theories.
I mean, Maria read it, but
yeah, Maria, you cannot confirm or deny.
No comment.
I think so. Alcius, the like person, thing, entity in Vargo's brain, I think has some connection to the tyrant, because Vargo is like weirdly obsessed about illness and disease and getting sick, and like there was that whole thing about how the tyrant was only able to be taken out by disease, and that like nothing else, they couldn't find any other way to get rid of the tyrant in the past, and it was like the 3 concubines or whatever, I can't remember what they called them, who like gave him venereal diseases that caused him to die, and that like obsession with like needing to stay clean, I thought that might be an interesting like, and like, who is Alcius? Like, that's the thing that's kind of weird, of like, where did this, and like he seems to be like an older male presence, like that's what the vibe I get from Alcius, someone who's very knowledgeable about the Numenata, Numenatria, whatever the word is.
We know what you mean.
And yeah, that's like the thought that I had. I was like, oh, and like that's when I started to think that there was no way Vargo was the Rook because of Alcius, because it wasn't like adding up. And like, though it does seem like the hood for the Rook does something to Serato when he puts it on, like the very end, where it like sort of subsumes kind of part of who he is and changes his personality a little, which was kind of interesting.
Well, and hides who he is too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, well the hood is definitely magicked. Like we knew that right from the beginning of the book when it talked about, she talked about how it's like imbued or whatever. And now Ren has her own little thing that she can be a superhero too.
I'm actually kind of excited for that. I want to see what happens. But I also liked that Ren couldn't even figure out anything about the Rook via the cards, which was interesting to me, because it makes sense the mask would be imbued so you couldn't like see who is underneath it. but I was surprised it extended to the cards.
But I feel like the pattern is like governed by the gods, and that
That's
the
fair.
gods have a stake in the Rook doing his work. And that's kind of how I read it to be, is like the gods were blocking her from being able to do the reading.
Interesting. Okay.
Fun fact, and I'll send you guys the article on WhatsApp or in Discord actually, so everyone can read it. But there's a whole article that they have, MA Carrick has, about how they did the pattern readings, and like that all of them are accurate except for a few. And that one, they laid it out, and one of the cards gives away for Serato exactly who the Rook is. And so they were like, well, shoot, we can't put that in because it's too obvious. So then they had Ren they like leaned back on like, oh, Ren not being able to do the reading accurately. So like that was a purposeful thing, but it's kind of cool that like the actual cards that were given was so perfectly like suited.
Well, yeah, but when you know the answer, okay, so I read tarot. When you know the answer you're trying to get, you can make the cards say what you want them to say. Like, because the cards have multiple meanings in tarot.
Yeah, but like it was a very obvious one. I'll send you a link and you can tell me. But yeah, I know what you're like. You can interpret them, but that one was like a very like.
Because that's why tarot cards work so well for con artist characters, is because
there's a lot
way that. The way that like it's the same idea as like behind horoscopes, right? Like you read into it what you want to read, and like that kind of thing, where it's like it's just vague enough that you can put your own spin on it, kind of thing. So
I did like that they kind of got into that too. I feel like it happened more in the second half, where Ren would like judge other people's reading of the pattern because there were different elements that you could bring out, whether or not you wanted to like con someone into something or actually give them reasonable advice. So I enjoyed that part of it a lot. I liked the tarot card. I didn't give a crap about anything else, any other magic system, but I liked the tarot.
Yeah.
Well, and like the fact that it was
like a good and a bad meeting, and that adds like different. Yeah, I thought it was really
well.
Cool.
That's same with like real life tarot. You have like every card has an upright meaning and a reversed meaning.
But it's like how the card's laid, right? It's like it's
so when you lay a card, if it's upside down, that has a reversed meaning,
right?
But it's not like reversed in the sense of it's the opposite of what, like it has a different meaning if it's upside down from whether it's right side up.
And I might be wrong on this, but I think that what I read was that like the card itself, you don't lay it in a direction. It's just like that card can be interpreted either this way or this way, like every time. So I think that's slightly different than like which positioning.
Well, there's so many different kinds of tarot too. So like that's something that like you could walk into a new age crystal shop and they'd have 30 different decks that you can buy, right? I mean, hell, you could probably walk into a Barnes and Noble and buy 30 different decks of tarot. I don't know, we don't have Barnes and Noble where I live, but like the cards that I use are the Rider Waite deck. I actually have a deck that I made myself. Where's
the Kickstarter for yours? I want yours.
Well, no. Like the images,
Patreon,
like
Patreon idea. You can do our tarot. We always have a
Rider
Patreon
Waite images. I'm wondering if. Okay, hang on. I'm going to turn my camera off and I'm going to grab my deck. I'll show you my deck.
I feel like I learn surprising things about Sarah all the time.
Seriously, I'm such a nerd. Like I want all the bookish like items, like or the like
read.
I want it all. Give it to me.
Yeah, no, I signed up for that Kickstarter before I even read the book. I was like, I want it. That sounds
Kate,
cool.
None of that surprises me, Kate.
Yeah, I know.
I'm so glad it got funded, though. I was really worried.
Did you sign up for it, Maria? The Kickstarter?
Of course, yeah. Like,
of course. And did Chris? I'm guessing Kristen did it because to ship to Denmark would be great.
So. Yeah, I don't know if Kristen did. I know she knows of it, but
wow.
Awesome.
That's great.
It's the Rider Waite images. So they're the like traditional images that you would normally see for Rider Waite, but I made them. Hang on, I'm gonna sneeze.
Oh wow.
That's cute. Sorry.
Look, I love the backs of those.
Yeah.
So I just they're
beautiful.
They're a 2-ply. So like I printed them and then I laminated. Like I put the second.
Okay.
Like, the
next slide, you read all of our fortudes, please.
But it makes the deck really thick because they're a 2-ply deck. But they sit on my shelf, like literally, like if you ever watch my videos, this brown box that sits on my shelf, like right next to where I film, has my cards in them.
That's so cool.
I haven't done a reading in a while.
I genuinely want a reading.
I don't know how it would work like virtually. I've never done a virtual tarot
You've
card
done that
reading.
before, haven't you, Maria? Hasn't somebody read
Hannah
your cards
did one
before?
virtually for me, like from we're not in the same location, and it was actually surprisingly so on point. So I would love to see like it done again.
I'll just watch you get a reading.
I
I'll
learned.
just drop in.
Yeah.
Right?
I learned how to read tarot when I was like 12 from my dad, and so I've been doing it for like a long time. And like this is the deck I use now. I used to use a different deck that was actually different art, which was a Thoth deck or Toth. I never know how to pronounce it. Thoth. But anyhow, so yeah, tarot for me is one of those things that like when you tell me a book has tarot, I'm like, oh, this is like
Oh, I
cool.
did know
I
that
want to
about
like
you, yeah.
include, and like that's why the One Dark Window book that has tarot card ish things in it I really thought was really, really cool. And then what was the one, the Cloisters also has tarot cards in it, which is
I didn't know that.
kind of like
Cool.
dark academia. So if you're looking for books with tarot cards in them.
Sarah, did you fund or sign up for the Kickstarter?
No, I actually like you had mentioned it, but I haven't actually gone to look at it.
I haven't looked at it either.
Yeah.
Well, there's a day left, so but I was just curious.
I've never ever done a Kickstarter, so I honestly don't I don't even know what that entails. Like you just pay and then they send you the thing. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think Kate can say the same. I'm sure Kate's funded a few Kickstarters.
Oh, I have funded many. I like
Why am I
getting the
not
like
surprised?
anthologies and like the indie books via Kickstarter. So I've funded a lot that I have not read.
I know.
Molly,
What a surprise.
Hey, did you get the Sword of Kaigen one?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I haven't even read that. It was just like
I'm
it looked
so
so
excited
cool
for it to
that
come.
I
It
needed
looks
it.
so cool.
I saw, is
Did
it
you get
Page
Legends
and Wit?
Lattes? Did you get Legends and Lattes?
No, because I didn't really like
Pricey.
Legends and Lattes. So
Yeah, that's fair. Oh yeah, you didn't like it. That's right.
Goodbye. Bye, Kate.
Sarah didn't either. I forgot about
And I'll
that.
take Sarah out right after.
Wait, what? I missed something. I was reading the Kickstarter. I have no idea
No,
what
good.
just
We're
happened.
talking about Legends
Good.
and
No, no,
Lattes.
no.
Oh, we're not allowed to when Kristen's in the room.
Hey,
I
and
forgot about
Maria
that.
loved it too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did. You have me.
Yep.
You have me and your Vicious
Anyway.
Grace and your Legends and Lattes corner.
See, I need to read this Vicious Grace.
It gets
I
real good.
have it,
It's
but I haven't
on
gotten to
my
it.
shelf. Yeah, I haven't read it yet.
Oh yeah.
Maybe I'll put it in my picks since December's right when book 2's
Because
coming
we
out.
wanted to buddy read that before the second one came out. So
Oh yeah,
All are
I
welcome.
need to read that
All are
before then.
Join us.
Yeah, no, I'm on board. Just let me know. I'm signing up for too many buddy reads.
yeah.
You and Christy both.
Yes, it's a problem.
I have like this year, I have done like nobody reads, and I also realized I haven't done like any readathons this year really like at all. And I'm just sitting here going like I'm just in my own little corner reading my own stuff.
That's kind of nice though.
I was
But I
about to
want-
say that can be nice.
But I want to hear your thoughts on all of them.
I know I need to be
All
better.
three of you.
about
I'm like, I need to know
videos.
what you all are reading. That's all I care
I
about.
know I haven't posted
Yeah.
anything either.
What am I
like,
reading right now? Oh,
What
I
are you-
tried reading
let's-
Martha
let-
Wells, the Witch King.
Mm.
I
Try
haven't
I
it
know.
read
is
I
it
clear.
heard. I've heard. I know. That's not. I haven't picked
It's
it
not
up.
great. It's not
I
great,
know.
and it makes me very sad because I
Wait, did you
really
like
love
Murderbot?
Murderbot. I
Okay.
love Murderbot.
That's coming soon too.
Yeah, the next one.
one,
I'm
I'm
excited
so
about that. And
excited.
it's full length too, right? Not a novella. It's another
Mhm.
full length. Yeah, so that's exciting. But I think The Witch King, like it's dual timeline, and that's kind of I'm struggling with, and like the magic and stuff. It's not working for me at all, and I have to decide if I'm going to DNF it because technically, like I have the physical book from my library and I have to return it. And so I'm like, do I just DNF it or do I keep it and try and read it? That's really the the big question. That's what I've been trying to read. I mean, the main thing that I've been trying to read. I always have like 6 things on the go. So
That's fair.
Kate just finished this one, so I'm guessing you're not reading anything.
Well, I'm trying to decide because I am participating in the battle-a-thon that Mel's
Battle-a-thon.
doing. But this
What team
first
are you?
week, like it makes no sense. I'm on the Black Dragon team.
Oh, nice.
Because that fit my personality. And then I felt bad because like a bunch of people I know are on the red team. So it's like, well, too late now.
I'm on blue, so we're all on different teams.
Oh,
I should have been on green, but I'm on red. Like personality-wise, like quiz was
Yeah.
definitely green.
But like this whole first week, you're supposed to read stuff that like you don't get points for star ratings. So like I'm like motivated to read the stuff that I think I might not love, but also that makes me not want to read it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I have to decide what's next.
What is your prompt for this week?
So it was the bonding one, which was prominent relationship, which Mask of Mirrors worked perfect for.
Oh yeah, works perfect for that.
Yeah, use that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to use it. It would have been great for a 5-star rating, but
Mel said that you could just save your read and then log up. Like she said it.
That is very kind of her.
So I'm just saying.
Yeah, I don't know. I really want to start Water Outlaws. I've been looking forward to that since they announced it. I want to read it so bad. I might just start it and say
just start it.
It's good. Because I think that'll be a 5-star for me. I hope.
Mm-hmm.
I've had mixed luck with that author, but I still think that it'd be great.
I'm slumping a little because of this.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Very different opinions here.
I love that part of it.
Yeah, if you don't like tarot, then
this is not this series.
Be a bit of a challenge.
That's like one of the selling points, I think, of this series.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Yeah.
Way to bring us back around to the book. Good call.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, good call. This is what happened.
But I want to know what Maria's reading.
Yeah, Maria, what are you reading? This is a good way to wrap it up.
I'm behind, so I'm technically reading Mask of Mirrors and not done with that. But I'm supposed to be moving on to Grey Sister for backlist. And then again, that one kind of works because I don't think I'll give it higher than 3 stars.
Yeah, you're not loving that series.
Like week 1, and then I'll get all my 5 stars in. But I want to get to Blood Over Bright Haven by Emma Wang, which is Emma Long, which is like the Sword of Kaigan author. And that's a 5-star prediction. Yeah. And it's the same thing, Kate. Like, I need to read Grey Sister, but I also am slumping. So I'm like, I want a good like book that'll suck me in. So
yeah, sometimes you need that when you're.
I might pick up a small something in the middle. Yeah,
that makes sense.
This tarot and its episodes can be interpreted. Yeah,
I think what's interesting though is that in the book, like unlike in real life, like the tarot cards have magic behind them.
Magic.
So it's not, like I mean, depending on how you interpret, like in real, like I mean, there are people who do believe that tarot will tell you truths about yourself and the universe in real life, but like in the book they undeniably are revealing truths, particularly to Ren, because Ren has that connection to pattern, which
especially with her
born
deck, right? Like the specific deck that
the specific deck, and then being born on the specific day that she's born on, that like gives her that greater connection. So I think that's where like the things that she reads are appreciably different and immutable compared to the readings that other sources, I can't remember what the word is, for the tarot readers in the world, what they do.
Like Breaking the Curse, they use, what is it, horoscopes or astrology?
It's astrology,
right? Astrology, like your star signs
is also more magical. It's not just like reading a star sign thing. It's like that all has meaning that can then be affecting magic and like curses and etc. etc.
Yeah.
I don't know what series is that?
They had tarot in that one.
What series?
I'm way behind. There was a buddy read for that series that
Elemental Logic. I don't know that.
I've heard of this.
No, what's the first book in that series?
I think is the
Fire Logic. I've never seen this before.
Fire Logic is the first one. There's 4 in the series.
Oh, it's old. It's from 2002. That's why I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, I've never heard of this before.
Yeah, highly recommended, but I am a buddy read failure, so I.
Oh, that is an awful cover.
Relatable.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah.
Interesting.
But it seems interesting. I started reading it and I liked the first part of it. I was traveling while I was trying to read it, which I don't recommend. I tried to read so much while traveling. I just can't focus on anything then. So. Yeah.
Did you read the Empire trilogy? That buddy read, or did you also drop out of that?
Which one?
The it's Allen's, right? I think
I never started on that one because I had so many books going. There's like I don't have time for this. But I think was it Emma was gonna do read, so I'm probably gonna try and join.
Oh, nice.
For that because I really want to read that.
Yeah,
at least the first book.
I have high hopes for that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. It seems very political, which could be really fun.
That's what I've heard.
Well, and I think it sounds like the main character in that I'm discovering that I like unlikable female characters, which Ren kind of fits into. So
See, but I like
feel
unlikable female
I might
characters,
like
and I didn't like Ren.
I think there's unlikable
Unlikable in a
female
different
characters
way.
is like such a broad category.
Yeah.
So like I
Yeah.
find that I like certain like areas of that spectrum, but I don't like others. Like I kind of enjoy a hot mess type character who doesn't have their crap together and is kind of selfish, and occasionally they do the right thing, but mostly they're just kind of out for their own thing. So that level is fun for me.
I
which
think
is
it's the
now,
impulsiveness of Ren that I didn't like.
now I'm
that's
nervous about you
a big part of
reading Little Thieves, because
No, I've read Little
Oh, did you?
Thieves. I gave it 5 stars.
Oh wow.
I feel like she has some stuff in common with Ren, in terms
But
of
she's
that kind of
very
selfish
logic
drive.
driven. Like the decisions
is.
that she makes are very like, I'm doing this because of this, because of this, because of this. Whereas Ren says she's going to do something because of something and then does the opposite thing.
Yeah, Ren is more impulsive. I will definitely say that.
I don't like unlikable characters, but I think that what is unlikable to me is different from other people sometimes. So I do think it's too broad. It's hard to.
It's broad, yeah.
Yeah.
Do I know what?
I don't know what that is.
Me either. I have to look
But
into
it is a queer
that.
series, so I'm assuming.
It
something
does
to do with-
say. I looked it up, and it's got one of those like horrible early 2000s covers.
Yeah, it's like you
Mhm.
recognize it right away for that kind of era.
Yep.
Yeah.
It also like it doesn't sound like something that I would read, just because it sounds much more like high fantasy.
This was high fantasy though, so
Mm-hmm.
we got you there.
Yeah,
But
this was.
you didn't like the high fantasy part of it the most.
Part of it. Yeah.
To be fair.
To be fair though, this doesn't feel like traditional high fantasy in that it's not like.
Yeah. It's not bro fantasy.
No. at
Well,
all.
and it's
That's what I
not. It's
agree.
also not epic. I guess this one too would the Fire Logic looks more epic in scale, whereas like this book was very local in scale. Like it did not feel epic at all.
Okay. Fair. I think of high
and-
I
fantasy,
wonder
I
what the
mean
other
like
covers look like.
lots of magic systems and not our world, but you're talking more like scope kind of? Is that what you're
Well, I think for high fantasy, for me, it feels like more of that like more fantastical, less grounded in the real world. And I felt like this, because of like the influences,
it felt real world.
it felt more akin to the real world. Like I think that's how in my mind I kind of think of things. So like things that like Wheel of Time is high fantasy. Malazan, Book of the Fallen is high fantasy, because there's nothing in that feels anything like our real world. But like Gentleman Bastards even like feels more grounded, or like I'm trying to think of like other things I've read recently. Like if it just I don't know, you know that word no, I don't know how to pronounce it. I've only ever seen it written, so I'm not going to pronounce it on the internet for the first time. I'll go look it up before I do that. But like that like everyday element to it, like where we're like, you know, following people's lives in this, and it just feels more grounded in reality. But I mean, there's no such thing as genre if you actually think about it, because we can't like you can't define a genre. It's kind of like
We always get into this conversation.
This is a weird theory. Okay, so like when you think of the word sandwich, what is a sandwich?
This is gonna be the hot dog
whole
thing.
can of worms there.
So like a sandwich is what, like 2 pieces of bread with some stuff in the middle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But so like, is a hamburger a sandwich?
I knew that's where this is going.
Yep. You can even make an argument
By
for
definition, potentially.
other things like burritos.
Yeah.
So it can go like it could go
That's what I
so
think.
far like Pop-Tarts technically, if you want
Is
to
a
be
Pop-Tart a
crazy about it.
sandwich? Yeah.
A Pop-Tart.
Yeah, that's a whole
But
spectrum.
then so you start
That's
trying to
baked
like
into one layer. That what I would argue. If you put 2 Pop-Tarts and something in the middle of that, I could see you arguing that's a
It's a
sandwich.
Pop-Tart sandwich.
Yeah.
yeah, there's just like, I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like you can start trying to define something, and things
True.
that don't,
What are
you
you
know,
on?
it starts
But I also
to get a
think
little
there are like
confusing.
generally accepted things. Like when we all think
Yeah.
of a sandwich, we all probably imagine the same thing in our
The
heads.
stereotype. Yeah.
And that's how language
Yeah.
works. That's what we then use as
Yeah.
reference rather than challenging the whole idea of what it means.
But that's why I don't like hard. I agree. I don't like hard genre definitions or even subgenre definitions, because it's so flexible. So like Yeah.
It's all
'Cause
We
I
all
learned
think of,
the
and we
same
all have our
thing.
own
Yeah.
way of thinking.
Right.
Even like
so.
grimdark, it's like what level of darkness is for each person is grimdark. I've seen a lot of arguments on that.
And as soon as it becomes a buzzword, they just start applying it to everything.
Everything.
So then it
Everything.
gets
And then
really-
it's
Cozy.
meaningless.
Cozy.
Yeah.
Everything is
Oh
cozy
no,
now.
not this again.
I mean,
we should probably
I
wrap
agree.
things up.
It's
We've
like-
totally. I think we
Wait,
finished
I'm
talking
reading a
about.
cozy right now that I know Kate didn't like.
Hey.
I don't like the ending. I loved it until the
I'm
ending.
coming
And
to
the
the
ending
end.
ruined it for me.
I'm on page 200, so I'm like coming to the end. So we will see how I feel.
Yeah, no, I'm very
Well,
curious. I
now-
think you'll like it more than I did.
But
But
yeah,
I want to know after if I should read that, even though I didn't like Small Miracles, because I'm kind of intrigued. So
yeah, they feel very different.
okay.
yeah.
Feels very different from Small Miracles. Yeah.
Half a Soul is on my TBR. I just haven't got to it yet.
I'm assuming
I don't know when
Kristen
I'll do
laughs
it.
at us.
I'm wondering.
Always off topic.
Always
No,
off topic.
we-
I'm wondering if Sarah will like Half a Soul, or if the themes are too on the nose, because I know you don't always love that. Like, like Becky
I get-
Chambers
apparently
has
the
some
answer is
themes.
I'll be right back.
Yeah.
No worries.
No, but like Becky Chambers, like the themes are on the nose. I feel some of that in that one, but I love it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's just very cozy. And the ending,
It's very
I
cozy.
actually became more okay with the ending once I saw something from the author that explained why she made the choices she made for the ending. And I won't say anything about it because I don't want to spoil things. But if it's weird to you, look up on the author's website. She talks about it. Because for
Okay.
me, it was just like, what is this? So
Because I'm like, I feel like it's just gonna be a simple ending, but I guess it's not.
The thing with
no,
Half a Soul,
I want to know what you think when you get
Yeah,
to the end.
I'm not surprised that you loved Half a Soul.
in that one, like the summary is that there's like a fairy godmother or something, or whoever. There's a fairy messing things up, or fae or whatever, for a relationship that like the main character's trying to be in, right? Something very loose.
Well,
basically.
she loses half her soul,
Half a soul
when she's
to
a
a
kid.
fae.
It's stolen from her. And so
Okay.
she doesn't react like a normal person. It's kind of like autism spectrum vibes where she
Mhm.
doesn't understand like social interactions very well. She doesn't get embarrassed. She's not like got a strong connection to emotion.
Okay.
And she'll like know she's supposed to react a certain way, so then she does.
Okay.
That kind of.
But she
But
doesn't
that-
actually feel it.
Gotcha.
I
So-
love the romance. I love some of the side
It
characters.
was so great. I see. This is my struggle because I loved so much of it. The banter between them,
they're
the, like,
hilarious.
prickly sunshine vibe. Like it
They're
was
hilarious.
so good.
Now I want
And
to
I like love. I love Albert.
Yeah, no, I think you should.
I just love it all.
I think you would like it, Maria.
I think so
It's
too.
very. It's also very for people who like clean romances. It's very much that.
Oh yeah.
So
And
very
Kristen's
strong
reading.
fairy
I
tale.
just read that. It was fun.
I wonder.
That was really fun. Yep.
Yeah,
That's what it
agreed.
is. Like that's it's
Okay, but
very
I
much
love
that, Maria.
Okay.
Yeah,
This
the
is like my
hero's
thing.
very much. Yeah, and he's
Yeah.
like prickly. He's very bitter.
This
Yeah,
is
there's a
literally
reason he's grumpy.
the whole great coats thing that I love.
Yeah.
That Kate was kind
He's
of
got
a
like such a soft spot for her. You know what I mean?
I love this.
But I actually liked
Yeah,
him
like-
better than I like Falkio because Falkio is just he's too
It's on the nose.
idealistic isn't the right word. I don't even mind the on the nose in Grey Coats as much as like he's just so dismissive of anybody who's not like dedicated to his one path.
Okay,
And
but
it's
I'm still waiting for thoughts after the whole series because I think
Yeah.
it's
I
big.
will continue for sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's very much the vibe.
Well,
Yes.
anywho, any last Mask of Mirror thoughts?
No, any Mask of Mirrors thoughts? When will
Are we all
everybody be picking
continuing?
up the second book? I know. I feel like we're all.
are we
continuing.
can we do a live show maybe for Liar's Knot if you all pick it up?
I think.
Oh, I'll
yeah,
pick it up for sure.
we can all.
I need to buy it. Everybody else has bought it. I need to grab a copy.
I bought the whole series.
Hopefully maybe whenever we do it, maybe Kristen will be available to join. We'll see. I know life will be a little bit topsy-turvy. So.
Yeah, a little bit chaotic.
Yeah, I don't know if we wanted to do it in October, because November we'll be doing the
Oh, good point.
October. Or no, yeah.
Yeah. November we'll be doing the live. So we
We could do it. We could read
this month.
this month for September and then
People that wanna
discuss in
continue
October.
on.
And if people want to, we can continue on in the Discord as well. We can set it up as kind of an unofficial
We
pick.
can do
and be
mid-October.
better about it.
People more time
Yes.
too.
And
Yeah.
that about sums it up. Lots of masks, not so many mirrors.
Wasn't the day called something of the Mask of? Wasn't there like the Mask of Mirrors is a day?
Yeah, they say it at some point in the book. I remember, but I don't remember the
even
context.
remember it coming
There was
up.
also the labyrinth of mirrors that they walked through in the temple.
Yeah.
And the last
One of
book
the
is something with the
things-
labyrinth, right?
that I love about the series, having read 2 books, is kind of like we were talking about relationships earlier, and not in a romantic sense, but I love there's like almost a web of relationships and how one relationship between 2 people will affect a thread of other relationships. Like that really becomes a theme, especially I think in book 2. And I think with Masks and Mirrors as well, like that's an overarching theme that has really cool arc that I'm kind of already seeing come together that I'll be interested to see on thoughts with you all when we get to like book 2.
Cool.
I'm excited to see where it goes.
And
And
don't
it's
forget
the
to
exact
check
same
out.
length, which is interesting.
Oh, is
I
it?
feel like all 3
Oh, yeah,
books
it's
are the
long.
same
Is it?
length. Yeah, but at least they don't get bigger because a lot of times the first one is this, and then the second one's 1,000 pages. So at least they're consistent.
Yeah, I'm
Expect
glad.
slower pacing in the second book. I think people go in. Yeah, I know. I think that's like one of the things is if you go in expecting it to be really fast paced after the second half of the first book, it's definitely slows down. So
Okay.
Good to know. All right, well, 2 hours in, should we call it?
Yes, don't forget to go to the Discord and vote for the October
Yes.
pick. And
Yeah,
all of
so
our
put that
community
on our
tabs will have
communities,
that
yeah.
posted soon-ish. I don't know when.
Oh,
I'll do
we'll
mine
try and
today.
do this afternoon.
Yeah,
We'll see.
I'll-
today,
Okay, we'll try and coordinate. We're not good at coordinating if you guys haven't caught on today.
many of us. A lot of chaos.
Okay, goodbye, everyone. This was fun.
Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for joining.